The world should be perfection, they say. But who defines perfection when the very people uttering the word live in contradiction, clinging to lies, embracing distractions, and drowning in their own ego-fueled noise, where the truth is not only rejected but mocked, where silence is feared and noise is celebrated, and the ones who speak with wisdom are labeled boring, too serious, or out of touch, because in a world addicted to surface-level pleasure, depth feels dangerous, and anything that calls for inner reflection is seen as an attack on comfort. But the truth is this: perfection is not a pristine, untouchable fantasy. It is the alignment of soul, mind, and behavior. It is the courage to be honest with oneself in a world that profits off dishonesty. It is not flawless skin, or a perfect Instagram feed, or a perfectly executed plan, but the quiet strength to keep showing up with integrity when everything around you screams for compromise. And that's where most people fall. Not because they are evil or weak, but because they've been conditioned to trade their depth for approval, to trade curiosity for certainty, and to trade responsibility for blame. And so they walk around half alive, defending their own limitations with pride, never questioning the lies they inherited, and calling anyone who does negative or too intense. But intensity is not the enemy. Apathy is, ignorance is, willful blindness is. And the tragic thing is, many of us will only realize this when it's too late, when the cost of ignoring the truth becomes greater than the cost of facing it, when the body breaks down, when the relationships fall apart, when the career built on shallow ambition collapses into a pit of quiet regret. And in that moment, when the mask slips and the soul is exposed, the truth feels like fire. But the fire was always there. We just chose to numb ourselves to it, and now it's burning everything we thought we needed in order to reveal everything we actually are. And so we begin the journey, not to become perfect in the world's eyes, but to become whole in our own, to reclaim the parts we buried to survive, to speak the words we silenced for acceptance, to stand firm in values when compromise would be easier. And that's not a path for the faint of heart, because it means facing the 6 signs of foolishness not in others, but in ourselves. Yes, we talk about fools, but the wise know that the fool lives in them too. The fool who avoids discomfort, who reacts without reflection, who talks more than they listen, who blames more than they introspect, who seeks applause over alignment, and who confuses dominance with leadership. And the first sign of the fool is the closed mind, the kind that builds walls instead of bridges, that chooses certainty over curiosity, that scoffs at new ideas because they threaten the ego's fragile throne. And I've seen this in boardrooms, in dinner conversations, in friendships. I've seen the need to be right destroy more potential than failure ever could. And that's because the closed mind is not just stubborn. It is terrified of being wrong, because being wrong would mean rewriting the story they've told themselves for years. And yet, what is more noble than the courage to change your mind? What is more powerful than the humility to say, I was wrong, and I'm learning? But that requires ego death, and most would rather kill the relationship, the opportunity, or even their own dreams than let the ego die. And so the cycle continues. The second sign of a fool is the addiction to blame, because blaming is the great escape. It lets you pretend you're a victim when in fact you're just afraid to grow. And yes, life throws unfairness at us. Yes, people wrong us, betray us, underestimate us. But when that becomes the reason we stay stuck, we've handed over the keys to our own kingdom, and no one is coming to give them back. Because the truth is, power comes when you say, I am responsible, not in a guilt-ridden way, but in a sacred one. Because responsibility is not blame. It's ownership. It's the ability to respond. And the moment we own our response, we become creators, not victims. And creators move the world. The third sign of a fool is arrogance, loud, fragile arrogance, which is not confidence, but it's counterfeit. Because true confidence doesn't need to prove anything. It listens, it learns, it holds space. But arrogance shouts because silence feels like death to a shallow identity. And yet, the loudest person in the room is often the most insecure, building a house of noise to drown out the quiet truth that they don't actually know who they are. And when the applause stops, when the crowd leaves, they are left with nothing but echoes and emptiness. And that's why the wise seek silence, because in silence the soul speaks. And in silence, arrogance dies and truth is born. The fourth sign of a fool is the absence of empathy. Not just emotional empathy, but intellectual and moral empathy. The ability to understand a reality beyond your own. And I don't just mean being nice. I mean having the maturity to hold complexity, to listen without needing to fix, to sit with someone's story without making it about you, because empathy is not weakness, it is power. It is the capacity to build trust, to resolve conflict, to create change without domination. And a world without empathy becomes a battlefield of egos, where every disagreement is war and every difference is a threat. And sadly, we see this everywhere, people talking past each other, not to understand, but to win. And yet, what good is winning if we lose our humanity in the process? The fifth sign of a fool is the fear of change, because change threatens comfort, and comfort is the new God, worshipped in every ad, every scroll, every dopamine-driven distraction that says, don't think, just consume. But the soul is not here to be comfortable. It is here to grow, to evolve, to break open and rise stronger. And that requires pain, uncertainty, transformation. But the fool runs from that, choosing the illusion of safety over the reality of potential, not realizing that what feels safe now often becomes the cage tomorrow. And so we must ask, what are we clinging to that is silently killing us? What version of ourselves are we protecting that no longer serves who we are becoming? And are we brave enough to let go before life forces us to? And finally, the sixth sign of a fool is the inability to sit with discomfort, emotional, mental, spiritual discomfort. And that's because discomfort reveals truth, and truth demands change, and change demands death. The death of who we were, the death of illusions, the death of our old coping mechanisms. And that's why most people would rather distract, numb, avoid, or project than sit in the fire of transformation. But the wise walk into the fire willingly, because they know the fire doesn't destroy the real you. It burns away everything you're not. And so when we speak of perfection, we must understand it is not the perfection of flawlessness, but the perfection of presence, the perfection of inner alignment, the perfection of living with intention, truth, courage, and depth. And that is a path not many walk, but those who do. Change the world, not always loudly, not always visibly, but profoundly, quietly, and permanently, because the impact of the wise is not always in what they build, but in what they awaken. And if you, watching this, feel something stirring inside, a discomfort, a tension, a challenge, good, lean into it. Don't scroll away. Don't distract yourself, because that discomfort, that's your soul knocking, saying, you're more than this. And maybe, just maybe, today is the day you stop being a fool and start becoming wise.